The file sat on Compliance Officer Viral's desk for 3 weeks before anyone noticed it was glowing red. Not metaphorically red, not urgent priority red, but actually glowing, pulsing crimson red, the kind of red that in any sensible universe would mean, stop what you're doing and fix this immediately. But this was the Galactic Comptrollers Guild, where sensible had been replaced by procedural somewhere around the year 4000, and nobody had noticed the difference. Viral was a Krikstal, which meant he had 17 eyes, 4 of which were legally required to be focused on paperwork at all times. He'd been with the Guild for 42 standard years, processing extermination reports with the same enthusiasm most species reserved for watching paint dry. He was very good at his job, which is to say, he was very good at ignoring things that might require actual work. The Earth file, reference number TX447EXTM Sol 3, should have been simple. Primitive planet, pre-warp civilization, excessive violent tendencies, standard extermination protocol, sign here, file in triplicate, move on to lunch. Except the glowing, and the asterisk, and the footnote, and the sub-footnote, and the really unfortunate appendix on page 8147. TQ-Mac. Viral's vocal sac inflated to emergency proportions. TQ-Mac, get in here! TQ-Mac was Viral's assistant, a young Plorvan who'd made the catastrophic career decision of being competent in an organization that valued consistency over correctness. He scuttled into the office, his 6 legs making that horrible clicking sound on the ceramic floor that Viral absolutely hated but could never complain about because it would require filling out a workplace acoustic grievance form, and nobody wanted to deal with those. Sir, this file, Earth. Tell me about Earth. TQ-Mac's eye stalks drooped. Oh no, please don't tell me 99.997% completion rate. That's actually quite good, sir. I mean, extermination's a tricky business. Lots of variables, hiding spots. You know how it is with species that have opposable thumbs and TQ-Mac. Yes, sir. What's 100% minus 99.997%? TQ-Mac's mandibles clicked nervously. That would be 0.03%, sir. And how many humans were on Earth at time of extermination? The clicking intensified. According to the file, approximately 8 billion, sir. Do the math, TQ-Mac. There was a long, painful silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone's brain is forcing them to acknowledge something they really don't want to acknowledge. Finally, in a voice that sounded like it was being strangled by reality itself, TQ-Mac whispered, 240,000 survivors, sir. Viral's primary eyes closed, then his secondary eyes, then, just for good measure, his tertiary eyes, which he only used for reading really small print. 240,000. 240,000. To be fair, sir, that's less than 1% of 1%. Statistically speaking, it's basically... TQ-Mac, do you know what the acceptable survivor margin is for a Class C extermination? I don't actually, sir. 0, TQ-Mac, 0.000. The acceptable margin is no survivors. That's literally the definition of extermination. Viral's thorax was vibrating so hard his desk accessories started dancing. Do you know what happens when you leave survivors of a sentient species? They file complaints? Worse, TQ-Mac. They become a protected endangered species under Galactic Preservation Statute 4471B. They get rights, they get representation, they get oh no. Viral was rapidly scrolling through the appendices. They get automatic citizenship in the Galactic Council. They get financial compensation for species trauma. They get sweet, merciful void. They get legal standing to sue the organization responsible for their extinction attempt. TQ-Mac made a sound like air, escaping from a balloon filled with dread. Who authorized this extermination, sir? Viral's eyes went back to the signature page. Then all 17 eyes focused on the same line simultaneously, which was physiologically uncomfortable, but psychologically necessary. We did, TQ-Mac. The Comptrollers Guild authorized it. Signed off by Committee 771. Approved by Subcommittee 771A. Rubber stamped by Interdepartmental Review Board 771A7. He looked up. We authorized our own lawsuit. We're going to have to sue ourselves. Maybe the humans don't know about the statutes. Maybe they're too primitive to... The communications panel beeped. Varel activated it with the kind of dread usually reserved for medical test results. A message appeared written in perfect galactic standard with impeccable formatting and correct citation protocols. To Galactic Comptrollers Guild, Compliance Division, Office 447C, from the remaining humans of Earth, Legal Representative Wendell Kowalski. Formal complaint regarding inadequate extermination services. Statute reference, GPC 4471B, subsection 12, paragraph 4. They filed a complaint about inadequate extermination services, Varel said slowly. They're complaining that we didn't kill them properly. Is that legal? According to Statute 4471B, yes. If an extermination fails to meet completion standards, the surviving members can file for emotional damages due to incomplete traumatic experience. Varel was scrolling faster now. They're claiming that leaving survivors created uncertainty about species status, caused unnecessary hope and subsequent despair, and violated their right to a clean extinction. That's insane. That's humans, Takamak. Varel's vocal sac was approaching dangerous pressure levels. You want to know why they were scheduled for extermination? Look at page 3, 441, section on problematic species traits. Takamak pulled up the file. His eye stalks began reading, then drooping, then practically melting off his face. Tendency to weaponize bureaucracy. Ability to find loopholes in any system. Documented cases of turning legal frameworks against their creators. Persistent inability to accept defeat, apparently can survive on spite alone. Sir, this says their spite has been measured as an energy source. And we left 240,000 of them alive. 240,000 humans who now have nothing to do except read galactic legal code and make our lives miserable. Varel stood up, which was impressive because Krixtal didn't technically have legs. Get me Committee 771 on the communicator. All of them. I don't care if they're in hibernation, meditation, or the middle of reproduction. Everyone who signed off on this extermination needs to be in my office in 20 minutes. Sir, Committee 771 hasn't met in person for 6 years. They do everything by subspace relay because Chairman Grunvax won't share breathing space with Vice Chairman Pixlor after the incident with the 20 minutes. Somewhere in the asteroid belt, approximately 7 astronomical units from where Earth used to be, Wendell Kowalski was having the worst day of his life, which was really saying something considering his planet had been destroyed 6 weeks ago. He was a maintenance technician, had been a maintenance technician, past tense. Because the thing you're maintaining no longer exists when your entire civilization gets vaporized by something called a planetary sterilization beam, which sounded like it should be used on kitchen counters, not continents. Wendell had been fixing a communications relay on Europa Station when it happened. He'd been inside an access panel, wrestling with a cluster of fiber optics that some absolute moron had installed backwards, when every alarm in the station started screaming. By the time he'd extracted himself from the panel, knocked over 3 tool carts, and made it to an observation window, Earth was not there, not destroyed in the Hollywood explosion sense. Just not there. Replaced by an expanding cloud of debris that used to be home. His first thought, which he would never admit to anyone, was, well, at least I don't have to finish that fiber optic job. His second thought was more appropriate. Oh my God, everyone's dead. His third thought was, wait, does this mean my student loans are cancelled? Wendell was not a hero. He was not a leader of men. He was a 43-year-old technician who'd taken a contract job in space because the pay was good, and his ex-wife couldn't garnish wages from Jupiter's moons. He had a beer gut, thinning hair, and a comprehensive knowledge of wireless router troubleshooting that was now completely useless because there was nobody left to have Wi-Fi problems. The station had 63 people on it when Earth died. They were scientists mostly, researchers studying Europa's subsurface ocean, looking for microbial life or whatever it was scientists looked for when they weren't busy being vaporized. Wendell was the only maintenance tech on site, which meant when the station's systems started failing after the destruction of their supply chain, he was the one who had to keep everything running with duct tape, prayer, and an increasingly creative interpretation of what constituted safe. Wendell! That was Dr. Noreen Lau, the station's chief xenobiologist, who'd spent 30 years studying hypothetical alien life and was now dealing with actual aliens in the worst possible way. She came storming into the maintenance bay, waving a tablet like it was a weapon. "Wendell, you need to see this. If it's another message from the aliens explaining why they killed everyone, I already read it. Very thorough, great formatting, real professional genocide." "It's not that," Noreen shoved the tablet at him. "It's this. I've been going through the Galactic Legal Database. We have a Galactic Legal Database. We do now. The aliens transmitted their entire legal framework to us as part of the Post-Extermination Species Closure Protocol, which apparently is standard procedure." Noreen's eyes were wild. Not, "I've gone crazy" wild, but "I found something so absurd that reality is breaking" wild. "Wendell, we have rights, legal rights. The kind that make our old Geneva Conventions look like a children's playground rulebook." Wendell stared at the tablet. It was written in English, perfect English. Someone, somewhere in the galaxy, had programmed a translation algorithm that understood English better than most English speakers. The title read, Galactic Preservation Statute, 4471B, Rights and Compensations for Surviving Members of Inadequately Exterminated Species. "Inadequately exterminated," Wendell said slowly. "They're saying they didn't kill us properly." "Exactly." Noreen was practically vibrating with vindicated rage. "And according to Section 12, Paragraph 4, we can file a formal complaint. We can sue them, Wendell. We can sue the bastards who killed 8 billion people for doing a bad job of it." That's... Wendell scrolled through the document. It was 50,000 pages long. He'd read lease agreements shorter than some of these footnotes. "That's the most beautifully bureaucratic thing I've ever seen." "I know, right? It's like they took every possible legal protection, every possible loophole, every possible procedural safeguard, and crammed them into one document just to make absolutely sure that nobody could ever claim they weren't being fair about their genocides." Wendell kept reading. His expression slowly changed from grief to confusion to something that looked suspiciously like a smile. "Noreen. Look at Section 47, subsection Q." She looked. Her jaw dropped. "Compensation calculated as cumulative GDP of extinct civilization for 50 years prior to extermination, paid in galactic credits to surviving members in equal shares." Wendell, that's about $4 quadrillion divided by 240,000 people. Wendell did the math on his fingers. That's roughly $16 million each, in galactic credits, which, according to this exchange rate table, he scrolled further. Oh, wow. One galactic credit equals approximately 10,000 US dollars. There was a long silence. "So we're billionaires," Noreen said faintly. "We're space billionaires," Wendell corrected, "which is either much better or much worse. I'm not sure which." "Wait!" Noreen grabbed the tablet back. "There's more. Section 58C. Surviving members of inadequately exterminated species are granted automatic citizenship in the Galactic Council with full voting rights, diplomatic immunity, and access to all galactic resources, including technology, databases, and transit systems." She looked up, eyes gleaming. "Wendell, they have faster-than-light travel. They have teleportation. They have technology that makes our smartphones look like rocks. And we can just Take it. According to Statute 4471B, yes, it's compensation. It's in the law. Noreen started pacing, her scientist brain clearly working overtime. They killed our planet because they thought we were dangerous. They thought we were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too prone to weaponizing everything we touched. And then they survived, leaving enough of us alive to weaponize their own legal system against them. Wendell thought about this, thought about 8 billion dead people. Thought about his sister in Minneapolis, his nephew in Tokyo, his parents in Florida, all gone. Thought about libraries and museums and restaurants and dive bars and little league games and everything that made Earth, all reduced to cosmic dust. Then he thought about the aliens who'd done it, sitting in their space offices, probably drinking space coffee, thinking they'd wrapped up a nice clean extermination and could move on to their next quarterly targets. "You want to file the complaint?" he asked. "Oh, I really want to file the complaint. You realize this is going to make things complicated. Wendell, our planet is gone. Things are already complicated. We might as well be rich and complicated." He thought about that. Then he grinned. It was not a nice grin. It was the kind of grin that maintenance technicians develop after 20 years of dealing with broken systems and people who won't read instruction manuals. "Okay. But if we're doing this, we're doing it right. We're going to read all 50,000 pages of this statute. We're going to find every loophole. And we're going to make these aliens regret leaving us alive. That's the spirit. Also, I want my title to be legal representative. It sounds official." Done. Wendell pulled up a fresh document on the tablet and started typing, "To the Galactic Comptrollers Guild." In a conference room somewhere in Sector 7G of Galactic Comptrollers Guild headquarters, Committee 771 was having what could politely be called a heated discussion, and what could more accurately be called barely controlled organizational panic. There were 11 members of Committee 771, representing 11 different species, each with their own unique way of expressing horror. Chairman Grunvax, a Tertullian who looked like a cross between a mushroom and a very disappointed accountant, was emanating spores of distress. Vice Chairman Pixlaw, who still wasn't speaking to Grunvax, was communicating entirely through passive-aggressive holographic displays. The other 9 committee members ranged from quietly terrified to openly weeping into their data pads. "Let me understand this correctly," Grunvax said, his spores turning a distinct shade of accusatory purple. "We authorized the extermination of Earth on the recommendation of which department?" "Strategic Threat Assessment," said Pixlaw's hologram, which was currently displaying the words, "I told you so," in 17 different languages. "And their assessment was based on a 847 slide presentation titled Humanity, Why They're Too Dangerous to Leave Alive." Committee member number 3, a Vlaxian named Creshport, who was literally melting with stress, pulled up the presentation. The entire thing was based on analysis of human media transmissions, specifically their movies. Entertainment fiction, yes. The assessment team concluded that because humans create stories about fighting aliens, conquering space and surviving impossible odds, they must be planning to actually do those things. Grunvax's spores went from purple to a sort of neon orange that in Tertullian color language meant, "I have lost all faith in this organization. We exterminated a species because they made action movies?" In fairness, Creshport was now actively pooling on the floor. The movies were very violent, lots of explosions. The assessment team felt threatened. The assessment team felt threatened by fictional explosions. "To be even more fair," said committee member number 7, trying desperately to salvage something from this disaster, "humans had demonstrated concerning behaviors. They'd weaponized splitting atoms. They'd sent robots to other planets. They'd created global communication networks. They were clearly on the path to becoming a space-faring civilization, and every model suggested they'd be aggressive about it. So we killed them. We attempted to kill them, yes, and we failed to kill enough of them. By a very small margin. 2 140,000. Grunvax's spores were now cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrums. That's not a small margin, that's a large town. That's a medium-sized city. That's enough humans to read every page of galactic legal code and find every loophole we've ever written. Sir, Verrill spoke up from his position against the wall, where he'd been trying to become invisible and failing because Crixtal naturally bioluminesce when stressed. There's another problem. How can there possibly be another problem? The survivors aren't all in one place, they're scattered. We have 63 humans on Europa Station, 82 on a Mars research base, 45 on a lunar mining colony that somehow survived the planetary destruction, 37 on the International Space Station, which is now just floating in orbit around nothing, and about 90,000 on various commercial space vessels that were between Earth and Mars during the extermination. Verrill's glow was approaching emergency beacon intensity. The rest are on deep space missions, asteroid mining operations, and one very unfortunate luxury cruise that was touring the outer planets when it happened. A cruise? The Celestial Princess, all-inclusive tour of the solar system. They're currently stuck near Neptune with a full buffet, no destination, and very angry passengers who are now technically refugees. Grunvax made a sound like a deflating bagpipe made of depression. Please tell me the humans don't know about each other. Oh, they know, sir. Verrill pulled up a communications log. They've been coordinating, using our own communication infrastructure that we helpfully provided as part of the post-extermination species closure protocol. They've established a network. They're sharing information. They've created something called a shared document, where they're all reading the statutes and adding notes. A shared document. It's up to 12,000 pages of annotations, sir. They're collaborating. Pixlar's hologram changed to display. This is what happens when you don't let me review extermination protocols. Now is not the time, Pixlar. Actually, now is exactly the time, because I warned you that species with distributed populations should be exterminated with follow-up protocols to ensure complete elimination of orbital and extraplanetary populations. But nobody wanted to pay for the additional sweep because it would have gone over budget. The budget was reasonable. The budget should have included killing everyone. Committee member number 5, who'd been very quiet until now, raised a tentacle. Question: what happens if we just ignore the humans, pretend we never got their complaint? The entire committee turned to look at him. Just theoretically, what if we claim we never received it? Delete it from our systems, act like it never happened. Verrill's bioluminescence flickered with what might have been dark humor. That would be a violation of Protocol 881F, mandatory acknowledgement of complaints from endangered species. Penalty for ignoring such complaints is immediate dissolution of the organization responsible, criminal charges for all committee members, and automatic assumption of all organizational assets by the complaining party. So the humans would own the Comptrollers Guild. They'd own everything the Guild owns, yes, which includes this building, all our ships, our databases, our technology, and, oh, this is interesting, mineral rights to 4,171 planets. The silence that followed was the sound of 11 beings simultaneously realizing they'd made a mistake that would be studied in bureaucratic failure courses for the next 10,000 years. Finally, Grunvax spoke, his spores now a defeated grey. What do they want? The humans, what do they want? Verrill pulled up Wendell's complaint. According to their formal filing, they want financial compensation per statute. 4471B, Section 47, formal apology for inadequate extermination, citizenship rights for all survivors, access to galactic technology databases, diplomatic immunity, and... He paused. They want a meeting. They want to sit down with Committee 771 and discuss terms. Terms? Terms. They're the survivors. We make the terms. Actually, sir, according to Statute 4471B, the surviving party has right of negotiation primacy. They set the terms. We can accept or counteroffer, but they have first position advantage. Grunvax looked at his committee. His committee looked back at him with expressions that ranged from absolutely not to we're so sued. He looked at the human complaint on the screen. He looked at the statute book that had seemed like such a good idea when they'd written it 3,000 years ago, back when they'd assumed no species would ever survive an extermination attempt. "Fine," he said, in a voice like a file cabinet being dragged across concrete. "Schedule a meeting with the humans. Get me their representative." What was his name? "Wendell Kowalski, sir." "Get me Wendell Kowalski on a subspace call. Let's see what humanity's last survivors want from us." Jeez. The call was scheduled for 14:09 Galactic Standard Time, which was roughly 3 a.m. on what used to be Eastern Standard Time, but was now just whatever time the Europa Station computer thought it was. Wendell had been awake for 36 hours, fueled by coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through regret and determination, that felt suspiciously like unprocessed grief. The conference room on Europa Station had been designed for scientific presentations, not diplomatic negotiations with alien bureaucrats who tried to kill everyone you knew. There was a whiteboard still covered in equations about ice core samples. Someone had left a half-eaten sandwich on the table 3 weeks ago, and nobody had cleaned it up because they were all slightly traumatized, and sometimes you just let sandwiches mold when your entire civilization is dead. Wendell sat at the head of the table, wearing his maintenance jumpsuit because it was literally the only clean clothing he had. Noreen sat to his right, holding a tablet with their very extensive notes on galactic law. To his left was Rajiv Mehta, an engineer from the Mars base who joined their legal team because he had nothing better to do and had always wanted to be a lawyer, but had gone into engineering because his parents said it was more practical. "You ready for this?" Noreen asked. "Absolutely not," Wendell replied honestly, "but I'm too angry and too tired to care, which is basically the same thing." The communication screen flickered to life. 11 alien faces appeared, each more stressed-looking than the last. The mushroom accountant in the center cleared his throat equivalent. "Ah, yes. Hello. I am Chairman Grunvax of Committee 771, Galactic Comptrollers Guild, authorized representative of—" "Let's skip the titles," Wendell interrupted. "You killed my planet. Let's get to the part where we talk about why you screwed it up." There was a pause. Chairman Grunvax's spores flickered. "Mr. Kowalski, I understand you're upset." "Upset? Upset?" Wendell leaned forward. "Chairman, I'm not upset. Upset is when they discontinue your favorite cereal. I'm operating in a completely new emotional category that doesn't have a name yet, because most species don't have to deal with their entire planet being deleted. Nevertheless, we should establish a baseline of mutual respect. You exterminated 8 billion people and want mutual respect? To be fair," one of the other aliens spoke up, "we exterminated them very efficiently. The success rate was exceptional by industry standards." Noreen made a sound like a kettle about to explode. "Industry standards? You have industry standards for genocide?" "We prefer the term threat mitigation," another alien said quickly. "Genocide has such negative connotations because it's genocide." Rajiv put a hand on Noreen's shoulder. "Let Wendell handle this." Wendell took a breath, then another. Then he pulled up his tablet and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Okay, let's talk business. You screwed up your extermination. You left 240,000 of us alive. According to your laws, laws you wrote, laws you ratified, laws you swore to uphold, we are now a protected endangered species with rights and compensations." "Yes?" Grunvax's spores went grey. "That is technically correct." "Technically correct is my favorite kind of correct. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to provide the financial compensation outlined in Statute 4471B. You're going to grant us citizenship. You're going to give us access to your technology. And you're going to do it with a smile or whatever your species does to indicate pleasantness, because if you don't, we will bury you in legal proceedings that will last longer than your species. Mr. Kowalski, you must understand, the compensation amounts are based on complex economic calculations. I understand perfectly. You owe us approximately $4 quadrillion in Earth currency, translated to galactic credits at the rate of 1 credit per $10,000, distributed equally among survivors. That's $16 million each, in galactic credits, which according to your documentation is enough to buy a small planet. The committee members looked at each other with the kind of panic that happens when you realize someone has done more homework than you. Furthermore, Wendell continued, clearly enjoying himself now, Statute 4471B, Section 91, states that survivors of inadequate exterminations are entitled to reasonable accommodations to rebuild their civilization. I'd say providing us with technology to establish new colonies on habitable worlds counts as pretty reasonable. That would require extensive resource allocation. You destroyed our planet. I think you can spare some real estate. The political implications of introducing a new spacefaring species. You already introduced us to space by killing our planet. You don't get to complain about implications now. Grunvax was cycling through colors that would make a rainbow jealous. Mr. Kowalski, you're asking for resources that would bankrupt the guild. Then you should have killed all of us, Wendell said flatly. That's the lesson here, Chairman. When you commit genocide, you commit properly, or you face the consequences. Those are your rules. You wrote them, you enforced them, and now you get to live with them. There was a very long silence. Finally, Vice Chairman Pixelor's hologram changed to display. I told you we should have double-checked the orbital populations. Not helping. Pixelor. Wendell leaned back in his chair. Here's my offer. You provide compensation, citizenship, and technology access as outlined in Statute 4471B. In exchange, we won't file additional complaints under Statutes 4471C through 4471Z, which cover things like emotional trauma from witnessing planetary destruction, loss of cultural heritage, and my personal favorite, inadequate post-extermination grief counseling services. You're blackmailing us. I'm negotiating. There's a difference. Blackmail would be if I threatened to expose whatever corruption led to authorizing our extermination in the first place, which I'm not doing. Unless you make this difficult. Grunvax looked at his committee. His committee looked back with expressions that suggested they'd very much like to exterminate Wendell but couldn't, because that would violate approximately 847 different statutes and also prove his point. We will need time to discuss this internally. You have 24 hours. After that, I file the additional complaints. Wendell smiled again. I'm told Complaint Processing Center 7G is very efficient. I'm sure you'll have responses back within, 3 to 5 years? Years! That's the timeline listed in your procedural manual. Page 4441, section on processing timelines for endangered species complaints. I did my homework, Chairman. The call ended with Grunvax's spores approaching a color that might have been defeat or might have been preparing to resign. Noreen stared at Wendell. That was amazing. That was exhausting. Wendell slumped in his chair. Someone get me more coffee, or whiskey, or both mixed together, which I'm going to call the Planetary Destruction Special, and probably trademark. You think they'll pay? Rajiv asked. They'll pay. They don't have a choice. We have them cornered by their own bureaucracy. Wendell pulled up the statute book on his tablet. But we're not done. This is just the first round. We've got 240,000 humans scattered across the solar system, all of them pissed off, all of them reading these same statutes, and all of them realizing the same thing we did, which is, the aliens didn't just fail to kill us, they gave us the tools to make their lives miserable, And if humanity was good at one thing, it was making things complicated for people who deserved it. Across human settlements in the solar system, the same realization was spreading like wildfire through their makeshift communication network. A teenager on the Mars research base found Statute 5522A, which entitled Endangered Species to Educational Compensation, including free access to galactic universities. A grandmother on the Celestial Princess cruise ship discovered Statute 6634F about cultural preservation support, which legally required the Guild to maintain recordings and artifacts of extinct civilizations, meaning Earth's internet history had to be preserved and backed up at Guild expense. A software engineer on the International Space Station, bored and grief-stricken and still processing the death of everyone he'd ever loved, found something even better in the statute appendices, Section 9971Q, which stated that members of endangered species could adopt members of other species into their population for purposes of species preservation and cultural continuity. His message to the shared document was simple. Guys, we can adopt aliens as honorary humans. We can expand our numbers. This is insane. Within hours, 240,000 traumatized, angry, and very motivated humans were reading galactic legal code like it was the manual for revenge, and they were finding loopholes, so many loopholes. Committee 771 reconvened 18 hours later, which was 6 hours before their deadline, but that's what happens when you're panicking and can't sleep because you're too busy stress cycling through organizational disaster scenarios. The humans have been busy, Vril reported, his bioluminescence now permanently stuck at catastrophic migraine levels. In the past 18 hours, they've filed 47 additional complaints, cross-referenced 891 different statutes, and created what they're calling a class action lawsuit that somehow includes not just survivors, but also descendants of survivors going forward in perpetuity. They don't have descendants yet, Grunvax shrieked. They can't file on behalf of people who don't exist. According to Statute 7771M, they can if they declare intent to reproduce, which they did, all of them. They filed a collective declaration of reproductive intent that covers the next 10 generations. That's not how that statute works. That's exactly how it works, sir. I read it 3 times. I even consulted with legal, and they confirmed the humans are interpreting it correctly. Varel pulled up the flood of documents. They're also demanding access to galactic medical databases to ensure genetic diversity for endangered species propagation, which legally requires us to provide them with reproductive technology and genetic counseling. They want us to help them breed? They want us to fund a population recovery program, yes, which according to the statutes we have to do, or we're in violation of Endangered Species Support Protocol 4491. Epixela's hologram displayed, maybe if you'd listened to my concerns about follow-up protocols. Pixela, so help me. Sirs, Tikmak scuttled into the room, his carapace covered in stress cracks. We have another problem. How? How can there be another problem? The humans found Statute 9971Q, the adoption statute. The entire committee went very, very still. No, Grunvax said quietly. No, they wouldn't. They can't. They already have, sir. 3 hours ago, Wendell Kowalski filed adoption papers for 17 galactic citizens, miners on the asteroid belt colony at Ceres, who apparently became friends with some of the human miners before the extermination. The humans are claiming them as cultural adoptees and requesting they be granted human status for species preservation purposes. The miners accepted. The miners are thrilled, sir. Apparently being adopted by an endangered species comes with massive tax benefits and diplomatic immunity. They're calling it the greatest loophole in galactic history. Grunvax's spores went through a color that might have been complete systemic failure, or might have been, I want to retire and raise fungus on a quiet planet somewhere. How many more can they adopt? Technically, unlimited, sir. As long as they can demonstrate cultural integration and willingness to preserve human traditions. What traditions? Their planet is gone. What traditions could they possibly... Grunvac stopped. Oh no. Oh no. What? Asked committee member the late, who'd been silent until now, mostly because they'd been updating their resume. They're going to adopt everyone. Anyone who's willing. They're going to use the adoption statute to rebuild their population with volunteers from other species. Grunvac turned to his committee. Do you understand what this means? They're not just survivors of an endangered species. They're building a coalition, a legally protected, financially compensated, diplomatically immune coalition of beings who all have reasons to be angry at the galactic establishment. That's... Committee member number 3, who'd been slowly melting this entire time, was now just a puddle with opinions. That's actually brilliant. It's terrifying. We created the legal framework for them to build an army. Actually, Varel said, scrolling through more documents, they're calling it a cultural preservation society. Much better optics. I don't care about optics. You should, sir. The humans have started broadcasting their story across open galactic channels. They're presenting themselves as a scrappy, endangered species, standing up against bureaucratic indifference. They're getting sympathy. On the view screen, footage appeared. It was Wendell, looking tired and rumpled, speaking directly to a camera. Hi, galactic community. My name is Wendell Kowalski. 6 weeks ago, the Comptrollers Guild destroyed my planet. They killed 8 billion people, but they missed 240,000 of us. And now we're discovering that the same organization that committed genocide also wrote laws to protect genocide survivors, which means they knew this could happen. They knew they might mess up, and they created a legal system so complicated that we, a species they considered too primitive to join galactic civilization, can use it against them. He smiled. It was tired and sad and absolutely ruthless. So if you're out there and you've ever been screwed over by bureaucracy or felt like the system was designed to protect the powerful and ignore the rest, come find us. We're building something new. We're calling it humanity. And membership is open. The video ended. Grunvac stared at the screen, then at his committee, then at the growing list of adoption applications flooding in from beings across the galaxy who apparently thought joining a species that had been exterminated was a good career move. We're doomed, he said simply. Not doomed, sir. Tigmac tried to sound optimistic. Just legally compromised on a scale never before seen in guild history. That's the same thing. Over the next 3 months, humanity's population went from 240,000 to nearly 2 million. Adoptees included miners, farmers, artists, disgruntled accountants, 3 former guild employees who wanted whistleblower protection, and 1 very enthusiastic, jellyfish-adjacent being who'd always wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. The Comptrollers Guild tried to fight it. They filed counter-complaints, regulatory challenges, and even attempted to amend Statute 9971Q to prevent further adoptions. But every attempt ran into the same problem. The legal system they'd created was so thorough, so protective of endangered species, and so afraid of creating loopholes that genocide survivors could exploit, that it ended up creating different loopholes that genocide survivors could exploit. Wendell became the de facto leader of this expanding coalition, not because he wanted to be, but because he was the first one to file a complaint, and everyone else just sort of defaulted to following his lead. He ran strategy meetings from Europa Station's cafeteria, coordinated legal strategy via group chat, and somehow found time to keep the station's life support systems running because he was still the only maintenance tech available. This is insane, he told Noreen during a rare quiet moment, surrounded by datapads and cold coffee. I fix Wi-Fi routers. I shouldn't be negotiating with alien bureaucrats about refugee resettlement programs. And yet here we are, Noreen replied, scrolling through the latest adoption applications. We've got 300 new humans requesting settlement space on Mars. We need to coordinate with the Mars base about expanding their facilities, which means filing for infrastructure development grants under Statute 8841B, which requires environmental impact assessments, which, Noreen, yeah, do you think they'll ever just give up? Let us do our thing and stop fighting? She looked at him. Wendell, we're talking about a bureaucracy so committed to procedural correctness that they wrote 50,000 pages of regulations about how to properly exterminate species. They're not going to give up. They're going to keep filing counter-complaints and regulatory challenges until either we give up or they do. So this is our life now, forever, just us versus their legal system. Yep, great. Wendell drained his coffee. Someone should write a manual. How to rebuild civilization using only spite and loopholes. You're writing it. That shared document is up to 40,000 pages. That's not a manual, that's a cry for help. But the shared document kept growing. Humans and their adoptees kept finding statutes, cross-references, precedents, and loopholes. They discovered that endangered species could claim cultural spaces for preservation purposes, meaning they could legally request territory in the galaxy for human settlement. They found regulations about genetic material preservation that required the Guild to provide resources for maintaining biodiversity, meaning they could demand funding for reproduction programs. They even found one particularly beautiful statute, number 2447J, that stated endangered species had the right to participate in governance decisions affecting their survival, which Wendell interpreted as, we get to vote on stuff now. Adil, the Comptroller's Guild's attempts to stop this kept failing because they'd written their laws too well. Every protection, every safeguard, every careful procedural step was designed to prevent abuse of extermination protocols. But those same protections meant that once a species qualified as endangered survivors, there was nothing the Guild could do to limit their rights without violating the very principles the organization was founded on. It was like watching someone get strangled by their own safety harness. 6 months after Earth's destruction, Committee 771 held what would be their final meeting as a functional governing body. They'd been sued 847 times. Their budget had been frozen by oversight committees investigating their extermination authorization, and Chairman Grunvax had developed a stress condition that caused him to emit spores that smelled like despair and paperwork. "We have a proposal," Grunvax said, his voice like gravel being pushed through a strainer, "from the humans." "Another one?" groaned committee member number 5. "What do they want now? The moons of Jupiter? Voting rights in the Senate? Their own galaxy? Worse." Grunvax pulled up Wendell's latest communication. "They want to negotiate. They're offering to withdraw 90% of their pending complaints in exchange for this." The proposal appeared on screen. Human Settlement Initiative, final terms. Establish 3 colony worlds for human settlement, fully funded by Guild resources. Maintain financial compensation, already agreed upon. Grant humanity 1 voting seat on the Galactic Council. Provide technology transfer for FTL travel, medical tech, and basic infrastructure. In exchange, humanity agrees to stop filing new complaints and work within the established system going forward. All current adoptees maintain their human status and rights. The Guild formally apologizes for the inadequate extermination, wording negotiable. They want us to apologize for not killing them properly. It's symbolic, Tugmak explained nervously. They want acknowledgement that the extermination was both morally wrong and procedurally inadequate. It's actually quite clever. It forces us to admit both types of failure simultaneously. I hate them, Pixlar's hologram displayed. I hate them so much, but they're right. Grunvax looked at his committee. If we accept this, we're essentially admitting that leaving survivors was our biggest mistake. We're admitting that humanity used our own legal system against us. We're admitting that bureaucracy, when wielded by a sufficiently motivated species, is more dangerous than any weapon. Yes, agreed Committee Member Number 8, who'd already quietly accepted a job offer from a private sector consulting firm. But if we don't accept it, the complaints continue forever. We're all individually liable for damages, and humanity keeps adopting more beings until they have enough votes to replace us in the guild leadership. They could do that. Statute 15771C, Endangered Species Democratic Participation Rights. If they get enough voting members, yes, they could take over. The silence that followed was the sound of defeat, accepting a formal invitation to move in permanently. Fine, Grunvac said, his spores now a permanent grey that probably meant he'd need therapy. Prepare the acceptance documents, schedule a formal signing ceremony, and get me Wendell Kowalski on the communicator. Sir, about the ceremony. What about it? The humans want it held on Mars. They want to do the signing on human territory, not guild territory. They're calling it a symbolic reclamation of agency. Of course they are. The ceremony was held in the Mars Research Base's largest habitat dome, which had been hastily cleaned for the occasion, but still smelled faintly of recycled air and human stubbornness. Representatives from Committee 771 stood on one side, wearing their formal guild robes and looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. On the other side stood Wendell, Noreen, Rajiv, and a dozen other humans representing the scattered survivors. Between them, the adoption treaty sat on a table made from recycled station equipment. It was 400 pages long, had been reviewed by 17 different legal teams, and represented the most comprehensive surrender that wasn't technically a surrender in galactic history. Before we sign, Grunvac said, his voice carefully neutral, I want to understand something, Mr. Kowalski. You've spent 6 months fighting us. You've filed hundreds of complaints. You've adopted thousands of beings into your species. You've used every loophole and every statute against us, and now you're accepting a compromise that's less than what you could have demanded. Why? Wendell looked at the alien chairman, then at his fellow humans, then back at the treaty. Because we're tired, he said simply. We're tired of fighting. We're tired of reading legal documents until our eyes bleed. We're tired of being angry all the time. We lost our planet. We lost everyone we loved, and we realized that we could spend the rest of our lives making you miserable, or we could spend it building something new. He picked up the signing stylus. You made one mistake with humanity, Chairman. You left survivors, and survivors don't just survive, they adapt. They find ways forward. They build new things from old ashes. So yeah, we could have destroyed you through your own legal system. But that wouldn't bring Earth back. It wouldn't bring back the 8 billion people who died. It would just make us into something we don't want to be. Wendell signed the treaty. We're taking your resources, your technology, and your guilt, and we're building something better. A civilization that includes all the beings who felt left out by your perfect bureaucracy. A humanity that's not defined by what we lost, but by what we're becoming. He looked up. That's what you left alive when you failed to kill all of us. Not just people, not just a species. You left alive the idea that maybe, just maybe, the system can be used for something other than perpetuating itself. Noreen signed next. Then Rajiv, then the other humans, one by one. Grunvac stared at the treaty. Then, with spores cycling through colors that might have been respect or might have been relief that this nightmare was finally ending, he signed. The Galactic Comptrollers Guild formally recognizes humanity's status as an endangered species with full rights and protections, he said, the words clearly painful. We acknowledge our failure in the execution of Extermination Protocol TX-447-EXTM Sol 3, and we commit to supporting humanity's recovery and resettlement. And, Wendell prompted, Grunvax's spores went purple, and we apologize for the inadequate extermination. There we go. Was that so hard? You have no idea. The treaty was filed, processed, and entered into the galactic record. Within a week, 3 colony worlds were allocated for human settlement. Within a month, the first wave of humans and their adoptees were boarding guild transport ships, heading for new homes in distant systems. Within 3 months, humanity's first representative took their seat on the Galactic Council and immediately filed a motion to reform extermination protocols so this could never happen to another species. The motion passed. Wendell stayed on Europa Station for another year, keeping the life support running, coordinating the settlement efforts, and occasionally just staring out at the space where Earth used to be. Eventually, he transferred to one of the new colonies, New Terra, they called it, because humans are absolutely terrible at naming things, and set up a maintenance shop that quickly became the most reliable repair service in the sector. He never forgot Earth. None of them did. But they also didn't let it define them. The Galactic Comptrollers Guild underwent massive reforms. Committee 771 was dissolved. New protocols were written. The statute books were revised to close some loopholes and, ironically, create better protections for endangered species. And every new guild employee, during their orientation, was required to watch a training video called "The Human Incident, a Case Study in Why You Should Always Complete Your Exterminations Properly or Not Do Them at All." Wendell appeared in the video, still wearing his maintenance jumpsuit, looking tired and slightly amused. The final line of the training became legendary across galactic bureaucracy. We were maintenance techs and scientists and tourists and engineers. We weren't soldiers or heroes or anything special. We were just the ones who survived. And we survived long enough to realize that the people who tried to kill us had accidentally given us the exact tools we needed to make sure nobody else would be killed the same way. That's not revenge. That's just good maintenance. You find the broken system and you fix it, even if the system fights back, especially if it fights back. The video ended with Wendell holding up a wrench and smiling. They made one mistake with humanity. They left survivors, and survivors don't forgive, but they do build. Remember that next time you're filling out an extermination authorization form, somewhere in the galaxy there might be a maintenance tech who's really good at reading fine print. Across the galaxy, in committee rooms and guild offices, and bureaucratic centers on 1,000 worlds, beings watched that video and learned the most important lesson in organizational history. Never half-ass a genocide, because the survivors will weaponize your own paperwork, and there is nothing more dangerous than a motivated species with access to legal databases and too much free time. Humanity grew. 2 million became 10 million. 10 million became 50 million. They spread across their 3 colony worlds and beyond, taking their adoptees with them, building a civilization that was part human stubbornness, part galactic diversity, and entirely built on the principle that bureaucracy could be a tool for good if you were angry enough and persistent enough to use it that way. And somewhere in the Guild archives, filed under Critical Failures Do Not Repeat, the Earth Extermination Report gathered digital dust, its glowing red status indicator finally dimmed, replaced by a note that simply read, "Case closed. Species survived. Lessons learned. Do not attempt similar operations without complete population verification." Underneath, in smaller text added by someone with a sense of humor, "They left survivors. Survivors read."